Football League podcast. I'm your host, Joey Tysick. Across from the desk, as always, Joe Johnson. We took a couple weeks of hiatus due to election week, and then you went on vacation.
That's right.
But we're finally back. Back in time for the bipocalypse, as many fantasy football analysts are talking. How's fantasy football season been going for you?
It's going pretty badly. This is one of the worst fantasy football seasons I've had in a long, long time. You know, here in the ONTV League, I started off 4-0. Things were looking good. And then, got the injury bug. And now over the past 5 weeks, I've gone 1-4. I'm fairly confident I'm going to make the playoffs, but I'm not confident I'm going to get very deep into the playoffs because we have a couple of teams in the ONTV League that are just putting up points, 160s, 180s. I don't know if I've hit those kind of numbers yet in the ONTV League. So we got a couple of juggernauts that somehow have dodged the injury bug and are just firing on all cylinders on the right time of the year.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and I've had a similar experience ever since the Sammy loss. I went on a 3-game losing streak. So now I am on the edge of the playoff race all of a sudden, which is pretty wild. But I guess it makes it interesting. So when we get into those, we'll kind of talk about the standings towards the end as well. But in all of my leagues, I feel like I started off the season pretty well.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of dipping slowly, and it's making me nervous, and it stinks.
Have you been bitten by the injury bug much, or what do you attribute this downturn on?
I don't know. I feel like for me, it's mostly been just unlucky. I've left a lot of points on the bench in multiple leagues. The only injury issues are probably in my ESPN league, and the lack of having a quarterback. Since I drafted Anthony Richardson in that league, I've had to whirl my way around the quarterback carousel over the season. And then in ONTV, I think it's been, there's been some injuries here and there, but it's just been having to make lineup decisions, which I think is tough in an 8-team league because you have so many good players. You have to decide each week who you're going to go with. And sometimes that can bite you in the butt. In our big league, I think it's just poor luck. Part of it maybe because I didn't have enough running back depth, but I made some good trades, I felt like. And things just haven't worked out at the right time. So
in that big league that you mentioned, it was just injuries. Went back and looked at my week 1 roster, and since week 1, I had lost 7 players to long-term injuries, if not the season.
Yeah.
And then I made a big trade trying to shake things up, and I lost a player that I obtained in the trade to injury. It's been an absolute nightmare, and it's almost impossible to recover from that. Now, you pointed out that I might be on the bubble when it comes to the playoffs, but I think I'm going to have to win out. Unfortunately, and we'll get into looking at next week a little bit later in the podcast, but I'm devastated by bye weeks next week, so I don't know if I'm going to be getting a win next week.
Yeah, I mean, you're not the only one, especially, this week coming up, I believe we have Cincinnati's on a bye. Tons of fantasy implications on Cincinnati. Buffalo's on bye. I wish I could name the rest off the top of my head, but we'll see them as we go through the matchups.
I think Atlanta's on a bye, too.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
Yep. Atlanta's on a bye. Jaguars on a bye. They don't matter anymore.
Yeah, right.
But, so there's a lot of big fantasy players that are on these teams that are going to be gone. And as we'll see, it's kind of interesting when we look at the coming matchups that some people are going to be riddled with bye week stuff. So,
yep.
We'll go over last week, though, to give a little update. So the top scorer of the week that you kind of alluded to, putting up 188 points, was one Ian Witherspoon.
Not sure if that's the biggest score of the season so far, but, in a league where we don't have a ton of bonuses, 188 points is huge. He had a monster week.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Just looking all around, he started off with Saquon Barkley starting off the week, and
33 points.
Didn't really look back. So, yeah, and then Justin Herbert's been playing a lot better. That was kind of Ian's big question mark was quarterback. So he finally, Justin Herbert's just been playing better in the recent weeks, so that's been helping him out a lot. Brock Bowers, oh man, I don't want to talk about Brock Bowers because he hurt me in our big league. He's basically the reason that I lost.
He set like a rookie tight end record this past weekend, but in the ONTV League, 31 points, looking at possibly tight end one on the season for a rookie.
Right. And then I'm conflicted because now that I've fallen to the playoff bubble, I want Becky to make the playoffs, but there's also a chance that if she makes the playoffs, I might not. So I have this weird, I want her to make the playoffs, but I want to make sure that I make the playoffs first. And I just feel bad that, she put up 145 points basically and lost because she went up against the top scorer. And, we see that all the time in fantasy, but it's just one of those unfortunate things to happen. The other one that Ian had is Amon-Ra St. Brown, who had a monster game.
Oh, anyone who started a Lion last weekend against Jacksonville, they probably won their matchup, even though, unfortunately for Becky, she started Montgomery, who got 24.5 points, but she came out on the losing end on that one. But, boy, the Lions just had a field day and just put up so many points from quarterback, running backs, and wide receivers.
Yeah. The good news again, though, that, what happened while we were gone is Becky did get Christian McCaffrey back. So hopefully they'll slowly ramp up his workload. He's still, utilized a lot, but he's still not to that McCaffrey level that we know of just yet. So that could be something going forward if she makes it into the playoffs. That could be really devastating for her opponents. And then Mark Andrews, he struggled this week, I think, a lot because Isaiah Likely came back. Drake London, Denver is just one of the top defenses in the league at this point, and they have one of the best cornerbacks, if not the best cornerback in the league as well. So typically against Denver, the best wide receiver is usually going to have a poor game, and I think he's held most top receivers to less than 15 points or something, I want to say, and he's played against a lot of the elite wide receivers, so just tells you how good he is.
Well, the Falcons in general are so frustrating because they started out really rough, and then it seemed like they started getting things together, and, Cousins would have really big games, 2 of them against Tampa Bay, but then they just drop a stinker like this one against Denver, and it wasn't just the passing game. Bijan had a down week. Everybody struggled with the Falcons, so it's really really tough to really count on the Falcons because they're up and down every week. You never know what you're going to get.
Yeah. And then, again, luckily for Becky, there wasn't anything that she left on the bench that would have changed the matchup. Again, it's just hard to overcome when somebody has their best week. You have 3 players that put over 30 points up on your team, plus a 19-point performance from your defense. That's just hard to come back from.
Yeah, boy, did Houston have a big game. And I guess it was to be expected against Dallas's backup quarterback. But, yeah, that was a tough game to watch in primetime.
Mm-hmm. Our next highest scorer was Tracy. And you really tried for a minute.
Well, in our little group chat, I started off, before kickoff, conceding that I was going to get my butt kicked. I was trying some reverse psychology on the fantasy gods, like conceding a loss, and it looked like it was working for a little while. I had a 40-point lead fairly late on Sunday, and then everything fell apart for me.
Yeah, the second half of Sunday Night Football.
Yeah, and I wish the Bengals had their bye week this past weekend because Burrow and Chase, they just hooked up for multiple scores. Her Bengals running back, so she relied heavily on 3 Bengals players on Sunday night, and all of them put up some points. Brown, I don't think ever found the end zone, but he still put up 19 points without finding the end zone.
Yeah,
because impressive.
Joe Burrow is one of the most notable quarterbacks that throws to his running backs often. And because Cincinnati's defense is so terrible, they're always coming back from games. And so they just throw the ball a ton, and they just get so much volume to their receivers and Chase Brown, their running back. So Yeah, pretty crazy.
And then just to add insult to injury, she already had the game well in hand, and then Mixon on Monday night put up 3 touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns on
Continues to get
Monday
over
night.
100 yards per game.
Yeah,
well.
he's in the talk for possibly NFL MVP. I mean, he's been fantastic. So
Yeah.
once she took the lead, she just beat me down, and there wasn't a whole lot I could do about it. I did leave some points on the bench. Stafford had a really good game, 4 touchdowns. He was on my bench in this particular league. I started him in another league.
Yeah.
I started Purdy, who didn't have a horrible game, but he put up about 9 or so points less than Stafford. Other disappointments, Mooney had a down game. I see there's a questionable tag by his name now. I don't know if he got hurt during the game, but didn't even put up 5. Debo, he just isn't having the games that he should. You know, I was hoping that a Purdy Samuel hookup would pay dividends. Samuel only with 6 points despite Ayuk being done for the season. He just doesn't seem to be benefiting from that. One of the highlights of my Sunday was Breece Hall. 31 points. I believe he had 2 touchdowns that game. So
Yeah,
he was a bright spot.
Did he have a rushing and a receiving?
I think so,
Yes. Yeah, he did.
So that was one of his biggest games of the season when a lot of people seem to be down on Breece Hall and calling him a disappointment. The whole Jets team is a disappointment, but Breece Hall is still capable of putting up some big numbers. So 31 points from Breece Hall, but most of my other players are in single digits. Addison had a early touchdown with the Vikings, but then I think they said he had a concussion or something, left the game after scoring about 15 points for me.
Yeah.
Dicker had a decent game. He had a 50-plus yarder, which was nice. Gave me 12 points, but it's going to be tough to beat those juggernauts in our league when most of my players are putting up single digits.
Yeah.
The other person who, this is so frustrating because I started the Chiefs worthy last week, and he did nothing. I think he got 0, didn't he, last week?
Probably.
And
very little.
So he's on my bench this week, and he scores an early touchdown, puts up 16 points. So you just never know what.
Yeah, his previous week was 2.1, and the week before that was -1.
Yeah. And so obviously you got to put him on the bench, and then he blows up on my bench, of course.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, I knew heading into this game it was going to be an uphill climb, and I was optimistic throughout most of the day until the second half of the Cincinnati game, and once she took that lead, that was it. She was done.
Yeah. The other thing too that I wanted to bring up too is that Kyren Williams has slowed down tremendously. And I don't know if that's because
multiple
Puka,
games. Yeah.
I don't know if that's because Puka and Cooper Kupp are back. But that's like 3 straight games where he hasn't found the end zone, and he's just been kind of pedestrian.
Yeah, after having this incredible streak of games where he scored a touchdown dating back to last season, now he's starting a streak of non-scoring games, and you would think he would benefit from that passing game. If they have to cover Kupp and Nakua and everyone's kind of getting in on the passing game, you think that would open up some opportunities for Kyren, and the exact opposite has been happening. He just can't find the end zone.
Right. So, unfortunate. Tracy kind of running away with first place at the moment. So we'll have to monitor that as the season comes to a close. But next up was myself, who actually needed this win. It was a big win for me, beating the wife, and in fantasy, not just be clear.
That's funny.
And putting up 143.7 points to 117.74. My team finally kind of came alive for the most part. Josh Allen had a really good game, had a clutch game against Kansas City.
That rushing touchdown that he had was spectacular.
Yeah, and that really helped me out. Cooper Kupp getting into the end zone twice and getting over 100 yards. That was great. You kind of mentioned it earlier. Bijan Robinson and the Falcons just struggled. So that was kind of unfortunate to see. But the last couple weeks, Jahmyr Gibbs has really been looking really good. Didn't find the end zone. Oh, no, he did find the end zone. I was like, he's been scoring. But they've been passing it to him a lot. He's just looked incredibly fast, and the Lions are just beating the brakes off of everybody.
Yeah, and they're not letting up either. When they have a huge lead, they're playing as if they're behind. And I see people on TikTok and stuff going, "Oh, that's bad sportsmanship or whatever." I'm like, screw you.
These are professional athletes.
Yeah.
They're making millions of dollars.
You want to stop them, then put your defense out there and stop them. And the way the Lions are playing, I hope we see this in the playoffs where they just don't take their foot off the gas and play till the clock hits zeros.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. So anybody that has Lions players is enjoying their fantasy team for the most part right now. The thing that I wanted to point out that was wild to me, because I also played both of these players in my big league. TJ Hawkinson had 2 catches for 13 yards, and Travis Kelce had 2 catches for 8 yards. 2 of the top tight ends, at least name-wise, and typically in fantasy as well, just having pathetic weekends.
Yeah, well, despite, a couple of big tight end weekends, like a guy named Taysom Hill and Brock Bowers, 2 of your nemesis. Overall, tight ends had a really down weekend.
Yeah.
It's hard to come up with any other tight end names that put up big points.
And I feel like that's kind of been trending. I think the last time that we were talking, tight end stocks were up.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden they're right back down into the gutters where, unless you pick up, like, if you randomly picked up Jonnu Smith or Will Dissly in deeper leagues, like, then you were good. But all the top tight ends were pretty awful besides Bowers. Probably.
People have been pretty high on Kraft with the Packers. He got 0. And he wasn't hurt or anything. He was just like a healthy scratch. So a lot of tight ends underperformed this week, and it's weird that it happened across the league with a few exceptions.
Right. My big pickup of the week, though, was definitely Jawan Jennings. He's definitely taken over that number 1 role for the Niners, and especially with George Kittle being out of this game. He just took over. He had 10 catches, 91 yards, and a touchdown. It just seems like him and Purdy are the connection at the moment, and I'm kind of with you. I don't understand what's going on with the Debo situation, but it's not been good, and Jawan Jennings has kind of turned into the guy. He got me 25 points, which has been great. I got 10 points out of Fairbairn. He was on waivers as well, so that was nice. I think that was 2 weeks ago. And then the Minnesota defense also giving me 11. So despite having a few duds here and there, I was able to get just enough double-digit points from everybody else to secure the win.
What was your logic behind leaving Higgins on the bench?
He was questionable all throughout the week, and unfortunately, he was the Sunday night game. So I was nervous that if by chance he wasn't good enough, I didn't hear enough reports, that I just didn't feel comfortable with it. But if I knew ahead of time, like Sunday morning, that they said he was not going to be a game time decision, I would have played him because he's been great.
It was frustrating because he outperformed Chase.
Yeah.
And, as you know, I did a little parlay for that game and bet heavily on Chase having a big game. And it was Higgins who got over 100 yards receiving. And, so he outplayed Chase.
And it's typically because Chase is so good that teams are doubling him. And that leaves Higgins of one-on-one. Higgins is a bigger player than Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase is just faster, a little bit better route runner, but T. Higgins is really good one-on-one, so that's why he's been benefiting so much this year. The big discrepancy of this matchup, Jared Goff on the bench. Scored 34.5 points, had a monster game compared to Patrick Mahomes, who only had 15.8, which, Patrick Mahomes did have 3 passing touchdowns, but he had 2 interceptions, which kind of hurt him. And there wasn't any yards there. So it's kind of a weird game. So
I don't know if anyone saw this Goff performance coming because last week, wasn't it last week he put up 5 interceptions?
Yeah, he had 5 picks.
And he did start off kind of slow in this game. I think the first couple touchdowns were rushing touchdowns. And so it didn't look like he was going to have this monster game.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, he just started getting these long passing TDs into different players. And when the game ended, he had put up a monster score. So, in Marie's defense, I don't think anyone saw this coming.
Yeah, and to be fair, so that everybody knows, she did ask me going into the week what I would have done. And now my logic was saying Patrick Mahomes versus Josh Allen is usually fireworks.
Yeah.
And it was, once again, it was down to the wire. And they both elevate each other in those games. So I figured, this is the game Patrick Mahomes is going to step up. He's going to do a little bit more. And to a certain extent, he did, but he also made some mistakes. I think Buffalo's defense is a lot better than people give him credit for. And with the Lions, I've said it a few times throughout the year that the Lions are one of those frustrating fantasy teams that they can give you so many points in so many ways, but you're never exactly sure who's going to do it. Whether it's going to be David Montgomery having a couple touchdowns, Jahmyr Gibbs having a couple touchdowns. Maybe it's an Amon-Ra St. Brown game. Maybe it's a Jameson Williams game.
Or in some cases,
it's
all of them.
Yeah. So this was that rare occurrence that everybody on the Lions did really well.
Even Brock Wright.
Yeah. So I thought, there's a chance, Jared Goff doesn't throw it a whole lot, and then they're up by so much they just run the ball and run the clock out.
Yeah.
Now, apparently, they just wanted to beat the brakes off of the Jaguars, but, it happens. Luckily, it wasn't the difference of the game. A 19-point difference between her quarterbacks wouldn't have gotten her the win. So we scathed out of there. But, yeah, I needed that win a little bit more than her, even though she did want to compete for that first place spot.
And she did try to get the Mahomes-Kelsey stack.
Yeah, which had actually been pretty good lately.
Yeah.
Kelsey had, 3 straight weeks of plus 20? Yeah, 20-plus points. He'd been incredible.
But
and then Buffalo was just
8.
yeah, it was ugly. So Kelsey was very frustrating.
You can't just put it on her quarterback, even though you know how I feel about Mahomes. He's kind of dead to me in fantasy.
And Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
Derrick Henry only got, I think, 13 carries in this game, and he had 1 touchdown, which he's known for. But if he didn't get that touchdown, he would have had a terrible game because he also lost a fumble.
Yeah, so she got a lot of single-digit points and just people who underperformed. Swift got a touchdown. That was nice, 16 points. Metcalf, I don't know if he had a TD, but he scored 14. But, yeah, you can't just put it on her, quarterback play.
Yeah.
She got a pedestrian performance from the bulk of her starting lineup.
Yep. So she's not in any danger, though, of missing the playoffs. I am, so I'll take this win. And then finally, we'll just go over really quickly. Sammy got another win playing Malik, which at this point, Malik is just kind of done.
He's done, yeah.
Which is kind of at the point where I'm not going to even ask Malik to set his lineup unless he makes the playoffs by chance. But at the moment, I'm hoping that he just falls out of the playoffs. This is where we need Becky to win so that we can all get in the playoffs. Malik and Sammy can sit back and just watch everything. But if Malik does end up making the playoffs, I will force him to set his lineup. But just so you know.
Yeah.
Pretty boring from both teams, to be honest. Now, it would have been funny, maybe not for Becky, because it might have even almost kicked her out of the playoff race, is that Taysom Hill is sitting on Malik's bench.
Oh, my gosh.
Because George Kittle was out. He got 0 points. So that would have been his only replacement there. And then Jameson Williams probably wouldn't have been played because he did get Nico Collins back. So I'm not sure. I mean, Taysom Hill basically would have gotten him the win by himself, which is wild to think about.
Yeah.
But yeah, either way, both these teams out of the race. I think there's technically a mathematical chance that Sammy makes the playoffs, if I remember correctly, because 3 wins and Becky's at 4. I'm at 5. So if Malik missed the playoffs and then Becky missed the playoffs, there's technically a chance that Sammy would make it, but he has to win every game and Becky, I think, has to lose every game.
Yeah.
Something wild like that. So if Sammy's out there, I guess you can have something to look forward to.
I'm looking at Malik's roster. He started Rashad White on a bye, right?
Mm-hmm.
Butker's on IR, his kicker. Kittle was ruled out fairly early on. They can't say that caught him off guard.
Right.
It's just miserable.
Yeah.
Just awful.
So yeah. Let's go to the waiver wire since, like we said, a lot of teams on bye. So I haven't even looked at our waiver wire this week. So this will be all new to me. Now, if you need a quarterback by chance, because like we said, it'll be Joe Burrow's on bye. Jaguars don't matter. Kirk Cousins, maybe he's on your bench. And then Josh Allen, I have a backup quarterback already. So if you need a backup quarterback, I think Bo Nix has proven
Ooh,
that
he's
he's
been
just
on fire
he
lately.
he may get ahead of Jaden Daniels for Rookie of the Year.
Yeah.
The way that he's been playing, the Broncos look like they're going to make the playoffs, which is pretty wild right now. So that would be my top option. But
And he's
Russell
playing
Wilson,
a Las Vegas defense
yeah,
this
they're
weekend.
terrible.
So, yeah.
My other options, I would say Russell Wilson playing Cleveland. Cleveland's defense is nowhere near what they have been in the past. You could maybe speculatively add Anthony Richardson as he looked better last week after he got benched for a couple weeks. So as usual, there's a couple quarterback options.
You know what's funny is, of course, a couple of weeks ago, at one point I had 3 quarterbacks on my roster, and I'm like, okay, I got to get rid of one of these quarterbacks. I dropped Darnold. Now
Yeah.
everyone's like, oh, he's the hot waiver wire pickup.
Yeah.
I'm like, come on.
I don't
He's
want him.
been awful.
Yeah, I dropped him, or no, I still have him on my bench in my ESPN league. But last week I picked up Bo Nix for him, and that was a miracle.
Yeah.
So
And now this upcoming weekend he's facing the
Chicago, and they have a good defense. So
right up there. So stay away from Darnold. Take my word from a guy who has started him. He's so inconsistent, and he's surrounded by so much talent. I don't understand how he could be so bad, but he's been awful lately. I mean, yeah, he had a big game this past weekend, but don't look at the bright, shiny jewelry that's hanging in front of your face. He's not good, and he's facing a tough defense this week. Stay away.
Yeah. If you need any flex players, wide receivers, running backs, as usual, there's plenty of them out there. Jacoby Myers going up against Denver. I would say not for this week, but he could be good going forward. I had him on my bench at one point, but needed the extra roster space. But if you need somebody for this week, I would say avoid it because it's the Denver matchup, and he's now the number 1 receiver ever since Devontae Adams got traded. So I would stay away from that. Jerry Jeudy, he could be a good option as Jameis Winston just throws the ball a ton. Pittsburgh's defense is really good, but I think just Cleveland being down, he might be able to get you some good points. He had a monster game actually last week. What was that? Let me look it up. He had over 100 yards. 142 to be exact.
Wow.
On 11 targets, and he got a touchdown, so he had 26 points. So he's been a really good player in the last couple weeks for Jameis Winston. Running backs, Tony Pollard going up against Houston. That's a really tough matchup. Rico Dowdle, I'd stay away from Dallas running backs.
I'd stay away from any Dallas player right now. The quarterback, the backup quarterback who looks like he's going to play the rest of the season, just looked awful. I mean, he had that long touchdown, but man, who was it? Turpin.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the replay of that touchdown. He looked like a gazelle out there. Like he's
fast.
So fast. So I don't know if I'm going to give the quarterback a whole lot of credit on that one, but Ferguson, he was absent yesterday. I don't know if he left the game or what yesterday.
Yeah, I think he got banged up.
Yeah, so I didn't see him on the field. And then I also in another league, I started, what's the other wide receiver that plays opposite?
Oh, Jalen Tolbert.
Tolbert, he had 0, I think, up until late in the game and finished with 2 or 3 points.
Well, even CeeDee Lamb struggled, couldn't get him the ball all that easily. CeeDee Lamb was visibly frustrated in the game.
Yeah, stay away from. I mean, obviously you're going to start Lamb if you have him, but man, stay away from the other Dallas players.
Right. I think a pretty good player you could pick up if you needed a running back would be Austin Eckler, just because Dallas's defense is awful against running backs this year,
and he's been looking pretty good.
Yeah,
I don't know if I want to say the Eckler of past, but he's catching passes and
he's splitting time with Brian Robinson, but he's getting enough work that he's been getting plenty of catches, and it would be a good bye week replacement, I think. I also mentioned Jonnu Smith. He's out there. He's available. They're playing against New England this week. I think that's a good matchup. So if you need a tight end replacement, Jonnu Smith could be somebody to look for. Other than that, maybe Christian Watson, but Christian Watson to me is similar to the Debo style player of like, he'll have big blow up weeks and then he'll just disappoint you the next week. So you never know But if you feel like you need to make a push for the playoffs, like somebody like Becky, maybe you go for a Christian Watson.
Yeah.
I don't know what her bench looks like, but that would be the kind of player that, you want big points, you'll take that risk. That would be the kind of guy I would go after.
Something to keep an eye on this weekend. Apparently, the Giants are going to be going for a change at quarterback. I guess they've just seen all they need to see from Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
So they're bringing in, I don't know if he's a rookie this year, but they're bringing in their backup quarterback. And it's going to be interesting to watch because I don't know if it's going to hurt or help the wide receivers like Wan'Dale Robinson and those other players. So
Yeah.
it'll be something to watch, but it looks like the Giants are pretty much waving the white flag. They're going to give this other quarterback a shot. So use caution when it comes to Giants players until we see how this new quarterback plays out.
Yeah. Tommy DeVito played a bit last year.
Oh, yeah.
He was okay.
What's his nickname?
Tommy Cutlets. Yeah.
That's right.
I just call him Tommy Salami, but so he's got some fun parts to his game, but I don't know. It's hard to trust any Giants players, like you said. As far as defenses go, this is the point of the season where I start to focus on defenses and defenses that have good playoff matchups.
Yeah.
That's something I think a lot of people don't really always think about, is that you want to start preparing your team for the fantasy playoffs, and especially defenses, because that can sway things. So if you're able to hold an extra defense, I would do that just so that you have a defense ready to go for the fantasy playoffs. So, for example, Pittsburgh, one of the best defenses in the league, they are on our waiver wire. But if you look at their fantasy playoffs, they play Philadelphia, good offense, Baltimore, good offense, but they did play pretty well against Baltimore. They usually do. And in the fantasy championships, they play Kansas City.
Yeah.
So they could be, just a dominant Pittsburgh defense, but it's still risky. Whereas if you look at somebody like Tampa Bay has not been a very good defense this year, but in the fantasy playoffs, Chargers, okay, it's okay, not great. But then week 16, they get Dallas. Week 17, they get Carolina. Like, that seems to me better than even having a good Pittsburgh defense playing really tough opponents. So it's something you have to think about. There's plenty of good defenses. I think Washington has a decent playoff schedule. They play New Orleans week 15, Philadelphia week 16, and then Atlanta 17. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But if you need wins now, Washington is playing Dallas this week, and then they play Tennessee next week. Two of the worst offenses in the league at the moment. So just my advice, at least for picking your defenses, is just decide whether you need wins now or if you need wins for the playoffs. Like, if the playoff teams, Tracy, Ian, Marie, probably you, Joe, as well, look at those teams that have good playoff matchups and try to maybe get one of those teams. And then maybe for everybody else, try to get a team that's winning now.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can, hold two of them.
Yeah.
Hold somebody that can get you wins now and for the playoffs. So it's just something to think about and prep for, because it's kind of an underrated thing. Like, if you can get 10 points from your defense in the fantasy playoffs, that could make or break your season.
I agree.
Any other waiver wire guys you could think of that I forgot?
The only thing that comes to mind is there's been some talk about Pacheco. Coaches are going to be looking at him in practice this week, and they're going to make a determination at the end of the week whether he's going to get the start this weekend. Now, I've held on to him on IR, and I want to start him so bad. But, in other leagues where people may have given up on him, he might be on the waiver wire, buried way down or something. But it's going to be interesting to see if the coaches make the call to get Pacheco back in the starting lineup. And if he comes back, I'm happy because I need that. I've been struggling at the running back position all season long. So it's just something to keep an eye on.
The only thing I would caution with that is for teams that are – it's hard because I guess teams that are desperate would want the upside of Pacheco. But at the same time, there is a big downside that he might not play a full array of snaps and that he'll still be splitting with Kareem Hunt. So it's just something to be careful of. It's kind of however you choose to play fantasy. Like I would say, like for the big league that we have, and you're right on that cusp that you need every single win basically to make the playoffs. I would just throw him out there because you need his upside the most. If you're a team like me, who's on the fringe, but on the right side of the fringe, I guess if that makes sense, that I'm more on the inside of making the playoffs than outside. I think I would play it a little bit more safe and sit Pacheco till I see that he's healthy and good to go.
Now,
So
in
just something to caution.
our ONTV league, we have so much talent out there that I'm pretty good at running back depth, even though I do have Pacheco still sitting on the IR. So I don't necessarily have to rush him back in our ONTV league. But in the other leagues where I'm desperate for a win and hurting at running back depth, if they give him the green light, he's going in my starting lineup. I'm just that desperate.
Right. And that's what I mean. Like if you're in that desperate spot, play him. If you're on the verge of it, like I would be a little bit more cautious. But
yeah,
it's kind of how you want to play it.
Plus, Bijan's on a bye this week, and some really good running backs on a bye this week. So.
Right. So let's look towards week 12 with all these bye week fill-ins that we're going to possibly need. The first matchup is a big one. Me versus Becky. I'm 5-6. Becky's 4-7. Right at the cut line for the playoffs. And this is where I need this win. As much as I want Becky to beat me to be able to get herself possibly positioned into the playoffs, I need to get above that cut line before I start rooting for Becky. So after this week, Becky, you can get all the wins you want. But this week, I need this one.
This is literally like a bubble game.
Yeah.
Like you guys are on the bubble trying to get into the playoffs. It's like two desperate, starving animals in the arena, and both of you need a win desperately. This is going to be a game to watch.
And the problem is, if Malik had a lower record, I wouldn't care, and I would say, Becky, I would like you to beat me. I hope we have a good matchup, but if you beat me, that's okay because we'll both make the playoffs. But because Malik has enough of a team that he could sneak a win in the last couple of weeks, and I think that's about all he needs is to get a win, possibly, depending on what Becky does, of course, that scares me enough that I have to get this win first because I don't know what Malik's team is going to do. Heck, maybe he randomly checks his team and changes some of his lineup. I don't think that's going to happen. But if it did, then I'm like nervous. Or if, coming out of the bye week, George Kittle comes back and they're healthy and all that kind of stuff. Like, I don't know. It just makes me nervous. So I need this win.
You're almost neck and neck as far as projections go. McCaffrey's projected to get 20 against Green Bay.
McCaffrey's projections are always really high, so it's hard to gauge exactly. But, I mean, he definitely could get that much. So I had to sit Josh Allen because he's on a bye, so I got Jaden Daniels going. Luckily, he gets a layup matchup against Dallas, which is going to be really nice. And then kind of the big thing, and I'm still determining it, I think. No, I don't have any. Well, I have one other option. My only question mark this week is whether to play DeAndre Hopkins or Devontae Smith.
And Smith is projected at almost 12.
Yeah, and Hopkins is at 12.5.
12 against Carolina.
Yeah, but my thought process is so Becky has Jalen Hurts, so I get one of those, negate each other points. That if Hurts ever throws it to Devontae Smith, then, I'm not really losing anything off of her quarterback. And then it also just gives me another Sunday night player. So Becky would have Jalen Hurts on Sunday night going, and then I would have Cooper Kupp and Devontae Smith going on Sunday night, which could just make Sunday night fun because neither of us have Monday night players. So our matchup would be over by Sunday night, and I think that's always kind of fun. So
there's also a possibility that the Rams can get out in front, and this could turn out to be a shooting match against Philadelphia. So they might be throwing the ball in the second half. So
yeah, or Philadelphia just blows out the Rams, and who knows what happens.
They run the attack.
Yeah. My only concern, I guess, what I would say is Minnesota playing Chicago. I have Aaron Jones and TJ Hawkinson and after last week,
Mm.
make me a little bit nervous. So maybe I'll look at the waiver wire, but I don't think I'm going to really make any moves. But Minnesota playing Chicago as a defense, probably a little bit nicer. Because of bye weeks as well, Becky is on the Arizona Cardinals train again, where she has Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison, and James Conner all on her team. So if Arizona does well, I might be losing. And they're playing Seattle, who's not a very good defense. So that matchup does scare me a little bit. Other than that, looks like both of our lineups are pretty much set to how we want them. So as the projections say, it's going to be close either way. Could be the matchup of the week, hopefully. As far as the next matchup I have, it's you versus Ian. Ian moving up into second place after the big week. How you feeling about this matchup?
Well, what's frustrating is, again, I'm crippled by buys. My Brees Hall is on a bye. My Atlanta players are on a bye.
Yeah, the Jets.
So I'm hurting with buys where Ian hardly has any buys at all.
Mm-hmm.
I see Ingram on a bye, and that's pretty much it.
Oh, he does. He has Garrett Wilson.
Oh,
in his
okay,
lineup
Wilson. All right, so he's going to have to swap out Wilson, but yeah, that concerns me that he's going to be almost at full strength.
Oh, and he will have Mike Evans back, just in time.
Oh, is Mike Evans coming back?
Yeah,
Ooh.
It hasn't been confirmed, but he's trending in the right direction.
So, I for some reason, Purdy is marked questionable. I think he's having a throwing shoulder injury. That's something to keep an eye on.
Soreness.
But after Stafford's performance last week, throwing 4 touchdowns, I'm going to confidently put him in the starting lineup and hope for the best against a Philly defense that hasn't been all that great.
They've been better though recently.
Yeah, but I'm going to get Stafford in there. We'll see.
You guys have a lot of primetime matchups. You have Stafford and Kyron going on Sunday night.
Yeah.
Whereas Ian has Barkley. And then I hate to say it. Oh wait, you have a Monday night player. So he has a Monday night player in Justin Herbert and Justin Tucker as well.
I got Dicker the kicker.
And then you got Dicker. So your matchup's coming down to Monday night, possibly.
Another one.
As always.
It's been the whole season. In my flex spots, I got running backs on my flex spots. I picked up Chubb. I found him on the waiver wire last week. I picked him up. He hasn't been great, but I've got him in the flex spot for now, and then Bucky Irving.
Well, the other advantage, too, that I'm just seeing now is that Ian does have Kareem Hunt, so that if Pacheco comes back, that will hinder Kareem Hunt significantly, and maybe that forces Ian to go for he only has Ramondre Stevenson as his other running back, so that would be who he'd have to switch to, if anybody.
Yeah.
So that could be interesting. The projections are pretty close as well for this. Obviously, Garrett Wilson needs to be replaced, so Ian will have a slightly higher projection, but as the week goes on, the projections usually shift and adjust. So
I'm just trying to limp into the playoffs. So
we'll see. I said, luckily you're
that 4-0 start at the beginning of the season. I'm kind of coasting on fumes.
It's kind of reminiscent of Tracy last year, where she got off to that hot start. We thought it was just first time luck, and she kind of fizzled out a little bit. And then this year she came back with a vengeance. But that's kind of the trend that you're on, I would say, for sure.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, he's been putting up a ton of points, so I'm not expecting to win this week, but I'll give it my best.
Yeah. And then speaking of Tracy, this is just absolute luck, in my opinion. And this is where I really battled with wanting to tell Malik to set his lineup. But I won't, because I would rather have everybody that's interested in the playoffs make the playoffs. But Tracy has the exact bye-apocalypse I was talking about. Joe Burrow's on bye. Jamar Chase is on bye. Chase Brown's on bye. Alvin Kamara's on bye. Wow. Kyle Pitts is on bye.
Oh.
Sam Laporta is still hurt, so she has to figure out if she's going to get a new tight end. But if she gets a new tight end, she has to drop somebody. Probably Kyle Pitts, just in case Laporta's not good to go. And so if she gets any midweek injuries, she has nothing. And she has to drop somebody, or she has to kind of concede in a weird way. Like this would be one of those scenarios where I would say, if she drops Kyle Pitts for like Jonnu Smith and she puts Jonnu Smith in, and then all of a sudden, I don't know, Brian Robinson gets hurt. You're not going to drop Chase Brown, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Kamara for just some random person on the waiver wire.
Yeah.
And that's where I would say it's acceptable to not fill in your lineup. And especially because she's in first place.
And because she's playing a team who's pretty much given up on the season. So she actually really lucks out that despite being crippled by bye week, she's playing a team that is a weekly bye week.
Yeah.
And so she's probably going to win even if she had empty roster spots. But but she really lucked out.
The only thing I will say, though, is the only thing that really Malik is missing, I would say personally, is Nico Collins. Like if he put Nico Collins into his lineup, I think Tracy would be very in trouble of losing this week. Because even though Butker's on IR, so he's going to be out, Buffalo on bye, they're going to be out. So you get 0 points from your kicker and your defense. Those are the two positions that if you were to get zeros from, you'd be okay with.
Right.
Because you're expecting sometimes that happens.
Yeah.
If George Kittle comes back healthy, I think Malik has a chance here.
Yeah.
Just by not doing anything. Now, if he was playing and he's setting his lineup, he has to figure out where to put Nico Collins. And do you replace Ladd McConkey, even though Ladd McConkey's been playing well? Probably. But it would be some tough calls. So I think even with Malik not setting his lineup, there's a chance. And that would be kind of like, I don't know, 50-50, like worst case scenario, but also funny.
Because it would be a worst case scenario for the teams that are on the bubble. Because, this should be an automatic win for Tracy, which benefits you and Becky and Sammy. But I don't see it happening. I don't see him winning. And so you guys at the bottom, you want him to lose because that's going to guarantee that he misses the playoffs almost. But and then it won't hurt Tracy at all to lose this game. But I just don't see it happening. If I was a betting man, I would put my money on Tracy.
Right. So we'll see what happens because that's another important matchup either way. And then we have Marie taking on Sammy. Another close projection in these matchups. Again, Sammy basically needing to win every matchup that he has left. And it's unfortunate that he's playing Marie this week, as I don't think she's really affected by buys. Her kicker, I guess, is on bye, so she'll have to figure out a new kicker, which usually is no big deal.
Cook is on a bye, but she has some depth at running back.
Yeah. The only question is now the question that you had many a times last year: do you play Patrick Mahomes or Jared Goff? Jared Goff going against the Colts, who they're okay. They're kind of a middling team. But then Patrick Mahomes, even though he didn't have a great week last week, he's going up against Carolina. So once again, you're just in a troublesome spot of what do you go with?
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna give any influence on that this week.
I was looking at the wrong team a second ago. That was Sammy who has running back depth. But
yeah, he has a ton.
But yeah, no, I think she's. So who's the Lions are playing Indy? So yeah, that's a tough one. I'd go either way on that one.
Right. So I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to let her choose, decide what she wants to do, and go from there. The big question I think for Sammy actually is whether to put Tyrone Tracy in his starting lineup or not. If I was Sammy, I would put Tyrone Tracy in for J.K. Dobbins, just because J.K. Dobbins doesn't catch passes. They're playing Baltimore, which is like an outstanding run defense. And even though, the Giants are switching their quarterback, typically, if a quarterback is new and they like to throw to running backs, in a scenario where they're first playing and they're trying to play it safe, they'll dump it off to their running backs a lot.
Yeah.
So I think the Giants might lean on Tyrone Tracy and they're playing Tampa Bay, who's been pretty bad for the most part defensively. So
yeah. The question though is that if Tampa Bay gets out to an early lead, is the Giants going to be forced to throw it? I don't know.
But that's where I think if Tyrone Tracy is in there, he's he's a converted wide receiver from college, that they would still throw it to him. But yeah, it's a tough call. Other than that, it looks like everybody's got everything set, ready to go. And their matchup is over on Sunday night.
No, there's
Oh,
Henry's on Monday night.
Oh, that's right.
Chargers.
I forgot. So if
he leaves Dobbins in, it's going to be Henry and Dobbins on Monday night. That's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah. So some interesting matchups for fantasy implications, which is great. All right. Let's look at these league standings real quick, since we've kind of been talking about them, just to show what everybody's at. So Tracy, 8-3, top of the food chain. She, as you can see, there's a little star next to her name. She is locked in to the playoffs, which I feel like everybody else below her, right below her, is pretty much locked. I know there's mathematically they're not, but she is mathematically locked into the playoffs, the first of everybody. If you've also looked, she's over 100 points past second place in points scored. So that's great. Ian sitting at second place, tied with Marie at 7-4. Then Joe is at 6-5, and then me and Malik at 5-6. Becky at 4-7, and Sammy at 2-9. Like I said, not mathematically out of it just yet.
How many regular games are left before the playoffs?
3.
So 3.
Because 12, 13, and 14.
See, it makes me nervous because I'm 2 games up over the Honeybees.
Yeah.
And so I would have to lose 2, and she would have to win 2 for me to be in danger of missing the playoffs. But
right.
But with 3 games left, man, I gotta have to win at least 1, if not 2
and
of the games.
Here's your final matchups. You play Ian this week. Okay, that's tough. Next week you get Malik.
All right, so that's almost a guaranteed win. All
and
right.
the scariest thing of all,
last game of the season,
me.
You and I are going.
We could be. There's a potential that we could both be on the playoff bubble. Hopefully not.
You imagine.
But there is that chance.
That's funny.
Meanwhile, Becky, like I said, she plays me this week. She gets Sammy next week, which could be a good win for her potentially. I'm not going to call it outright. But if she beats me, maybe beats Sammy, that might get her in. Unfortunately, if it comes down to week 14, she plays Tracy.
Oh, no.
So either that would be a big, crazy win to get in the playoffs, or just a disappointing end to a season.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of craziness going on.
It's tough.
And then
maybe Tracy will rest her starters that week. We'll see.
And then Sammy, kind of the same situation, that if he wants to get in the playoffs, and again, he has to win all 3, he plays Marie, which is tough. He plays Becky, who's also fighting for the playoffs. And then he plays Ian in week 14.
Wow.
So no easy matchups either way. So yeah, it's going to be wild. Everybody fighting for the playoff spots right now. Tracy and Ian getting a bye in week 1 because of the 8 teams. And so at the moment, it would be me and Joe playing the first round of the playoffs.
Wow. So we could theoretically play back-to-back weeks.
Yeah, there's a chance that
That's
depending
funny.
on how things work out. But yeah, we'll see. Like I said, this is going to be the craziest week just because of, I think the primetime games are really good, at least for fantasy players. You know, you have Sunday Night Football is Eagles and Rams, a lot of big players, a lot of big names in those matchups. Monday night being Baltimore and the Chargers. I think the Chargers coming on late. Those are some big names. Thursday night, you got Pittsburgh and Cleveland. It's okay. But yeah,
Pittsburgh's been playing pretty well lately. So.
Right. And so with all the buys, it's gonna be crazy. Everybody's vying for playoff position. This is when, you start sweating in your fantasy matchups again. We went through the middle of the season kind of coasting, kind of being like, okay, we're still got a chance. And now we're in the point where you need all those wins that you can get.
Oh, yeah. I'll be good if I go 2-1 over the next 3 weeks. That's what I'm kind of hoping for. So
yeah,
we'll see.
like I said, I think if I beat Becky this week, I'll feel pretty good because then I'll have that separation, and then it's basically between her and Malik for that final spot.
Yeah.
So this is a big week for both of us probably. And then Sammy, just good luck. Good luck at trying. I know he's going to try his heart out. So
he does, man. I give him credit for that.
So hit the waiver wire if you need, as always. Trade
Trades
deadline
are done, right?
Trade deadline is over in this
Yeah.
league. Some leagues it's still going. But yeah, most standard leagues are done. So no more trades. You got to hit the waiver wire, make your roster moves, and hope that you can survive week 12. The other thing I forgot to say that about those week 14 matchups, there's another big bye in week 14
Yeah.
just before the playoffs.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
similar to defenses, I'll say real quick, might be something you want to prepare for. If you see you got a lot of guys that are week 14 buys, maybe start picking up people early if you need to. Just double check. But other than that, good luck to everybody, and we will be back next week to discuss week 13.